Hi educators! For today's educational vlog, we are going to tackle about primitive communism and egalitarian society.
Primitive communism and egalitarian society. Our objective for today's lesson is to define primitive communism, history of primitive communism, characteristics of primitive communist societies, the evolution of primitive communism, and to define egalitarian society, origin of egalitarian society, as well as the types of egalitarianism. So what is primitive communism? Primitive communism was a concept put forward by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, who proposed that the traditional hunters and gatherers were based on egalitarian social relations and common ownership. A Marxist model socio-economic society with primitive communism had no defined or hierarchical structure or capital. Marx suggested that the ancient methods of production are the key pillars that define the transitions of societies. The early characteristics of primitive communism involving the primitive ways of hunting and gathering paid for traditional methods of agriculture. Primitive communism is therefore a collective right to basic resources in a social relationship like society or family without any authoritarian rule. History of primitive communism. Karl Marx and Engels were inspired by Louis Henry Morgan's description of communism in living that characterized the Iroquois nation of North America. The speculative evolutionary history by Louis highlighted the liberty and equality among the ancient people that was evident in the family setting of the Iroquois nation. Ingalls transformed this idea into an evolutionary theory with a publication called The Origin of the Family in the year 1884. He argued that transition from traditional modes of production to subsequent production involved a change of production for domestic or family use to production for sale or exchange in a transformation from communal family relations to an individual family as the main economic unit. Marx and Engels expanded the use of communism to include not only hunters and gatherers, but also subsistence of agricultural communities. Characteristics of primitive communist societies. In primitive communism and societies, every able-bodied person was engaged in the production of food and everyone shared in the food that has been obtained by either hunting or gathering. There is no private ownership of property such as clothing and such similar items because the primitive society produced just enough and is immediately consumed and there is no surplus. Whatever exists for a limited time, like tools and housing, are commonly owned. There is a division of labor, with men taking much of the hunting, while the women are involved in the gathering. Pregnant women or those nursing their babies are protected from the dangers of hunting to preserve the next generation. However, there is no division of labor in other aspects such as leadership, since both men and women take part in decision making. The evolution of primitive communism. The rise of social class society has changed the human history. The communal ways of organizing society have since changed. Humans have moved from a society of equality and communal living to one characterized by oppression and exploitation. The agricultural revolutions around the world have transformed most hunter-gatherers to farmers. The need for a political structure to advance the affairs of the communities has brought about significant changes to communal leadership and decision making. Now let's move on to egalitarian society. It is a society that aims to minimize discrepancies between different social classes. and to distribute wealth and power uniformly across these different classes. Egalitarian societies emphasize the importance of an equitable distribution of resources, as well as equality of rights and benefits among different social groups, according to gender, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, and etc. In egalitarian societies, all individuals are born equal, and all members of society are said to have a right to equal opportunities. These types of societies are often referred to as classless societies. So egalitarianism, it is a political doctrine that holds that all people should be treated as equal from birth, usually meaning held equal under the law and in society at large. It is a belief in human equality, especially with respect to social, political, and economic rights and privileges, and advocates the removal of inequalities among people and of discrimination on grounds such as race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and etc. Origin of egalitarian society. From the French égal, mean equal or equalitarianism, it is a school of thought within political philosophy that builds from the concept of social equality, prioritizing it for all people. Egalitarian doctrines are generally characterized by the idea that all humans are equal in fundamental worth or moral status. Egalitarianism is the doctrine that all citizens of the state should be accorded exactly equal rights. The term egalitarianism has two distinct definitions in modern English, either as a political doctrine that all people should be treated as equal and have the same political, economic, social, and civil rights, or as a social philosophy advocating the removal of economic inequalities among people, economic egalitarianism, or the decentralization of power. Some sources define egalitarianism as equality reflecting the natural state of humanity. And now let's move on to types of egalitarianism. The first type is economic egalitarianism or material egalitarianism. It is where the participants of a society are of equal standing and have equal access to all of the economic resources in terms of economic power, wealth, and contribution. It is the founding principle of various forms of socialism. Moral egalitarianism. It is the position that equality is central to justice, that all individuals are entitled to equal respect, and that all human persons are equal in fundamental worth or moral status. Legal egalitarianism. It is the position that equality is central to justice, that all individuals are equal to respect, and that all human persons are equal. So the principle under which individual is subject to the same laws, with no individual or group or class having special legal privileges, and where the testimony of all persons is counted with the same weight. Political egalitarianism. It is where the members of a society are of equal standing in terms of political power or influence. It is a founding principle of most forms of democracy. Locke egalitarianism. It is a view about distributive justice, what is just or right with respect to the allocation of goods in a society, espoused by a variety of left-wing political philosophers, which seeks to distinguish between outcomes that are the result of brute luck, such as misfortunes in genetic makeup or being struck by a bolt of lightning, and those that are the consequence of conscious options, such as career choices or fair gambles. Gender egalitarianism. It is a form of society in which power is equally shared between men and women, or a family structure where power is shared equally by both parents. Racial egalitarianism. It is the absence of racial segregation, the separation of different racial groups in daily life, whether mandated by law or through social norms. Opportunity egalitarianism or asset-based egalitarianism. It is the idea that equality is possible by a redistribution of resources, usually in the form of a capital grant provided at the age of majority. It is an idea which has been around since Thomas Paine in the year 1737 to 1809. Last is the Christian egalitarianism. It holds that all people are equal before God and in Christ, and specifically teaches gender equality in Christian church leadership and in marriage.